so Shaheen, this whole
Testing, check one, two.
Morning, Paul.
Hey, Ian. Well, the whole weekend they were talking about communication and storytelling, gamification.
I just gotta get some pins.
I'm just going to follow you around this way.
Keep that.
I like your pins. Is that Oxy
And your yeah, it's all a team effort, you know.
I love the logo.
Pretty cool.
They made that? Oh, it's great.
Right?
Perfect. I use it everywhere.
That's the only one, right?
So, can that be for the context?
You can steal it.
No, like, can we use that as an on-ramp and just say, let this be the on-ramp? Yeah, let's unify the on-ramp. I mean, over time.
Yeah. Okay, Gaia, where's that? Hello, I'm Professor Sanjay Parker. Oh, of course. We met briefly. So it's so wonderful. Thank you for joining us. Thank you very much. This is Dr. Paul Zeitz, one of our colleagues from DC. From DC? Yeah. Yes.
Oh, yeah, good. You're from Highland? Oh, Rick.
Oh, we have one.
I love your country.
Over here.
Yeah, so we're working with
Sharon, I want you to sit over middle center. And you can adapt, right? You're good. I know you can. That's so great. That's so great that you Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. No, he's not here, but he should be coming pretty soon. You bet. And he'll be, I mean, so there's a seat here I can give you if you want. A gym. Where did Jim's go? Jim Trincata's seat?
Jim Trincata's
But I don't get tired. No, I don't get tired. And like when you spoke, I was really inspired. You were talking about abundance. And I try to present myself that way as well. I have a doctor and I say that I have self-improvement.
Do you want to be with Jim?
I'm the doctor for like Down syndrome. So we want to inspire and creativity and transformative solutions. That's what you do.
Oh, come on.
It's a.
I have a question for you. Were you involved
I know it's
in,
beautiful. It's Chinese.
people around Paris?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, but I
It's a
know.
choice, right?
Like, talks
They were
about
alumni.
The primary person on environment for Obama
Yeah.
is she is a woman named Kelly Sims Gallup.
Okay.
She's a professor at Tufts, Oxy grad.
Okay.
And she's director of the National Environmental Center
Okay.
at Tufts. And I can introduce you by email.
Okay.
She was in all the negotiations.
Okay.
And his
For
people.
Todd? Or?
Well, she was the White House. She could tell you. I don't
Okay.
want to speak for
Okay.
who did what.
Okay. All right.
But she was the one that dealt with China.
Could you introduce me? Because my husband is a screenwriter, and he's now investigating to do
Just,
a movie on
I
Paris
should
Olympics.
remember, but if you just send me an email and
Yeah.
remind me, I'll
Okay.
connect you guys by email.
I'll do that right now before I forget.
Yeah, no, I'll remember too.
Okay.
Just today is a little.
Fun. It's fun. Okay.
Is that? My granddaughter was there.
No.
You guys, they're live streaming in the atrium.
Yeah.
We want to be in the room.
Well, you can go up there.
Like it.
And I did call.
It'll actually be in this building.
Yeah, 2 minutes. I'm just gonna get it. You do, right? Anthony's friend? Aaron. Oh, I need one with this. Amazing You know I love you. Yes. Okay.
Close the door so I can present to them.
Sanjeev?
It's a little bit late.
Okay.
or someone can answer. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, my dear friends. On behalf of Occidental College and our president, Jonathan Veach, our vice president, dean of the college, Wendy Sternberg, we welcome you today to this historic launch of the Global Ambition Local Action Initiative. There are so many people that I want to thank for making this possible. I'm going to start at home at Oxy and then go outwards in concentric circles. My dear friend and partner, Ambassador Shearer, who's now going to be meeting Mayor Garcetti as he comes to us, has been a remarkable mentor and truly a great diplomat for the city of LA and the country of the United States. So we want to thank him for all his leadership and partnership. Many of you know the Director of Programs for the Young Initiative in the McKinnon Center, Chumdun Lim. And she and the students that work for the Young Initiative and the McKinnon Center have been working tirelessly in partnership with our colleagues at the city and all across our great community to make this event happen. So I want to really honor them and thank them, especially for I guess I probably should introduce myself. I'm Dr. Sanjeev Kagram. I'm the John Park Young Professor of Global Political Economy here at Occidental College. And over the last 2 years, between 2015 and 16 actually, I traveled to 35 countries around the world as we launched the Sustainable Development Goals, which for those of you who don't know, I know we all know, but just to remind us, 193 member states of the United Nations agreed to and adopted in September of 2015. But I want to make sure that we understand that these are not UN goals. They are humanities goals. They are global goals. This was the most participatory, bottom-up development of an international agreement in human history. Millions and millions and millions of people from all around the world engaged to create these 17 goals and 169 targets. They provide us not only an aspirational framework, but an inspirational framework. And we here at Occidental want to be an SDG, premier college for SDGs. And in our partnership with the city, make sure that the city of LA and support the city of LA and all the communities here realize the most important part of the SDGs, leave no one behind. Part of what I saw around the world in those 35 countries, and we actually have, if I can say to you, we have over 30 countries represented here today, from Colombia to India, from Kenya to New Zealand, Japan, and all over the world, because this is a global movement, a movement that we would all participate in. And while today we are going to be launching this amazing effort with the City of LA and with the leadership of Mayor Garcetti and Deputy Mayor Nina Hijikian, our new Deputy Mayor of International Affairs, we want to partner and learn and jointly promote the Sustainable Development Goals all around the world. Because the other important part of the SDGs are, it's about people, it's about prosperity, it's about planet, it's about peace and partnerships. And it is only with partnerships that we can achieve the first four: people, prosperity, planet, and peace. We've been working with amazing colleagues at the City of LA. I want to, acknowledge them because they have been tremendous partners. First, Jean Holm, who is the Chief Technology Advisor for the Mayor, who has been a tremendous partner, who we've been working with all around the world. Who's just a true innovator, and I really encourage you all to get to know her and how much she's done. Aaron Brumman, please. Thanks to the generous gift from the Hilton Foundation, Aaron joined the mayor's team and deputy mayor's team as the director for the SDGs and Olympic Games effort from the city side. She joined, I think, all of the first week of December. And this day would not have been possible. She jumped right in, took leadership, worked together in the spirit of what the global goals are about, making it happen. Because as much as the global goals are out to 2030, 2030 will happen in a heartbeat. I have my 18-year-old son, Ram Kagram, here. And we've been having some workshops over the weekend, and we will continue with our partners from around the world, imagining and creating the possibilities of achieving these sustainable development goals. And I asked everyone to think, and I'm going to ask each of you to think for 1 minute with me. Who are the people you love the most? What are the parts of this world that bring you the most joy? And then think about the Sustainable Development Goals, from ending poverty, to reducing inequality, to empowering women and girls, to combating climate change. That's who we want this to be. So if I can ask everyone, in our busy lives where we go day to day, all the time, rushing and rushing, to take a minute and think about those people and those things we hold truly joyful in our hearts and our souls, and how it would take us forward. Let us take a minute. I hope you found those people and those places and those things that mean the most to you. And anytime you think that the Sustainable Development Goals, whether here in LA or any city around the world or community around the world, are not important, go back to that place, because that's who we're doing it for. Every day, every month, every year, until 2030 and beyond. I want to also announce that this is the beginning of our annual UN Week, United Nations Week. We want to thank Mila Rosenthal from UNDP for joining us. We're grateful to have you. We have distinguished leaders from cities from Mumbai, Bogota, Mexico City, Nairobi, San Jose, New York, and many other parts of the world. They're going to be coming up for a wonderful panel after the mayor's keynote address. Students at Occidental College, about 35, are already working with our partners across the city and city government to align the Sustainable Development Goals with our ambitious goals, with the sustainability plan, the resilience plan, our work on poverty and homelessness, to figure out what the data requirements are, how we can work on budget and innovation to align, how we can also work with community members from the United Way, to our private sector, to our young people in schools. The SDGs are an entire community-wide effort. And we believe, and our colleagues from other educational institutions like USC, Caltech, UCLA, Cal State LA, we want everyone to be part of this amazing journey that we're going to be on together. And I'm sure the mayor will speak about us hosting for the third time the Olympics in summer of 2028. We see that as an amazing opportunity to connect the SDGs to a global effort of solidarity, cooperation, the joy and spirit of competition. And that's going to be an important part of our efforts here. As we wait for the mayor, if I could just take a few more minutes of your time. I'm a refugee. I was born in Uganda. My family was third generation Ugandan in Kenya. We were expelled by a dictator named Idi Amin in 1972. At that time, we lost everything that we owned. We left with $50 in our pockets. We were taken out by the International Rescue Committee. We fled across the border to Kenya, and then we were taken out by the International Rescue Committee to refugee camps in Italy. And then we were sponsored to the United States by a wonderful family from a Unitarian church through a government program that welcomed people from all over the world, and including us as refugees. We ended up in the very exotic state of New Jersey, where I grew up. And over the, I mentioned traveling to 35 countries around the world over 2015 and 16, but in the last 20 years that I've been a professional, 25 years, I think I've been to nearly 70 countries around the world. And part of that is that I will always feel like a refugee. That's sort of part of what it means. Last year, our theme was on refugees, and we know about the Syrian refugee crisis, what's happening in Myanmar, all around the world. But what's so amazing about Los Angeles, the city of angels, is that we are a global community. We welcome anyone and everyone who can contribute and be part of and be connected and empowered what we have to offer here in the City of Angels. And for me, as a relatively new Angelino, I felt at home for really one of the first times in my life. So I want to thank our city counterparts for making that possible, the community members who make that possible, for all of those of us, because this is still a beacon of hope for all of us around the country and all around the world. So here's to the city of Los Angeles. Please, Council General, we can come over. Our ambition is a global one, but the Sustainable Development Goals, as I mentioned, as many of you know, have 17 goals and 169 targets. But in the center of it is Goal 11, Sustainable Communities and Cities. We know that the front line of getting services to ordinary people, water, housing, transportation, education, health, happens at the level of communities and cities. That is why this initiative is so critical. why the goals are not just goals at the international level or at the national level, but have to go down to our neighborhood levels. That's why we want to work with city council members and other local units around the city and the county in collaboration. We know that 70% of the world's population will be in cities over the next 10 or 20 years. And if we are to achieve the SDGs, it will be global cities that will make a big difference in being leaders. In many ways, the geography of global politics has changed. And so I want to honor our distinguished guest, Professor Saskia Sassen, without whom we wouldn't even have the notion of a global city. So Saskia, if you could. What we believe in Occidental is that the future of humanity depends also on the ideas we create, the students we empower, and connecting that in deep partnership with our stakeholders in government, and civil society, and private sector. When I came to Oxy, people asked me, why would you go to Oxy? You've gone all over the world, and what's at Oxy? And when I talked to Jonathan, our president, we had this vision of Oxy being the premier liberal arts college for global affairs. And we're realizing that vision under your leadership, Jonathan, so I want to thank you for that. But as important part of that vision is that we are here in the city of Los Angeles. We are part of an urban community, and perhaps the most diverse urban community in the world. And so we are deeply embedded in the community and city of LA. So this initiative brings together our deep commitment and priorities around global affairs and local connection, urban and global. And I want to thank our partners in our Urban Environment Policy Institute and Department for their leadership and partnership on that. We have the Center for Digital Learning of the Arts who are helping us on the data side. This is a college-wide effort, and we are committed to working with the city for the next 10, 12 years and beyond, because this is what we all believe in as a community here at Occidental College. I just want to mention a couple of more people. We have a fabulous director of international programs here, Raman Craigs. Unfortunately, she couldn't join us because her son is right now trying to get into Juilliard. So we're wishing him and her the best of lucks. But she's been an incredible partner. 2/3 of our students go around the world as a result of her leadership and all of our collective efforts. And now we have over 10% of our students that are from around the world, international students, again, in our commitment to connecting the global and the local. And I think the most important thing I want to say is to our students. You came to Oxy to learn and to grow, but I hope that you also see that you and are inspired by what is possible. What I always think about is that so many people tell us things are impossible, but a few people and then more people and then more people make the impossible the possible, and then the possible the probable, and then the probable what is accepted and day to day. And that is our vision of the Sustainable Development Goals in every way that we work. And for our students, it is you who will lead that and benefit from that, and the children that you have and the grandchildren that come behind. So we're waiting for the mayor. Which is as appropriate. But I think that what I can do is start to introduce the mayor as he enters. No. Yes. Okay. He should be on his way any second. So for those of you who don't know, Eric Garcetti is the 42nd mayor of Los Angeles. His Back to Basics agenda is focused on job creation and solving everyday problems for LA residents. He was elected 4 times by peers as the president of the Los Angeles City Council from 2006 to 2012. From 2001 until taking office as mayor, he served as a council member representing the 13th district that includes Hollywood, Echo Park, Silver Lake, and Atwater Village, all of which were dramatically revitalized under his leadership. He was raised in the San Fernando Valley. He got his BA and MA from Columbia University. He studied as a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford and the London School of Economics. And then we had the honor and privilege of having him as a faculty member in our Department of Diplomacy and World Affairs here. And I want to sort of acknowledge my great colleagues, Professor Anthony Chase, Professor Laura Aubert from the Department of Diplomacy and World Affairs, the only standalone Department of Diplomacy and World Affairs in the world. And going back to our UN program, we are the only college that has a partnership with the UN to send 20 students every year for a full semester to the UN, working with UN agencies, missions. And many of those students are here in the crowd, so I want to applaud those students. And thank Doug Gardner, the director of our UN program. Doug, thank you so much. Mayor Garcetti is a 4th-generation Angelino. He and his wife, Amy, have a young daughter. He's also a lieutenant in the U.S. Navy Reserve and is an avid jazz pianist and photographer. And when I first came here 5 years ago, I had the honor of hosting an event with my colleagues from the Young Global Leaders Network with the World Economic Forum, with Klaus Schwab, the founder and head of the World Economic Forum in the city of LA, where I got to moderate a panel just actually a conversation with Eric and Klaus. And we were envisioning the future of LA. And in many ways, today is sort of the next step from when we first connected in that journey of really transforming LA into the even greater place that it can be. He's told me then that he was a jazz pianist. I'm a jazz trumpet player. So hopefully at some point, we will have the possibility and privilege of doing some music together. Over the next 2 days, we're going to be working with our partners from cities in San Jose and New York around the country, our partners at SDSN, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, Patricia McCartney and James Patava from the World Council on City Data, and many others from around the world to advance real concrete tools and approaches to localize the SDGs. But in the end, it will be people, as I said, that make that happen. And so the greatest opportunity we have is to make sure that everyone sees the goals as their goals and to power our citizens wherever they may be, whether they are in Compton or the slums of Mumbai or the great city of Nairobi or back at New York where our UN is headquartered. I guess the last thing I'd say as we're waiting for Mayor Garcetti it's part of the job. Is I want to thank a few more people actually. Why not? Well, we can. I want to thank my colleague and brother, Dr. Paul Zeitz, from the Global Development Incubator. Paul was a champion in the State Department for the SDGs, and now with the Global Development Incubator, we've been working together for far too long than I can remember. And when I came back from setting up the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data with many of the colleagues that are around here, when I traveled to these 35 countries, I was coming back to Occidental College, and I thought I would just take some time with my students and reflect on that experience and what we could do. And Gene Holm on the one hand and Paul on the other hand pulled me right back in. And I don't know if you've ever seen The Godfather, one of my favorite films. But in The Godfather Part 3, he says at one point, "I keep trying to get out and they keep pulling me back in." But this is willingly and without question. So, Eric, Mayor Garcetti, we're so delighted and honored to have you here. I've been trying to keep them busy and occupied while they're waiting for you. We want to welcome you back to Occidental College. We want to thank you for your inspiring leadership, for making all of us better people and making LA a true leader here across the United States and all over the world. We are here to join you in partnership at Occidental College and across the cities, the communities of LA, to really realize this bold ambition of the Sustainable Development Goals. So without further ado. And if I can present you with your honorary SDG pin, I think we're going to lose this piece of it. Thank you. There you are. Nice. And I don't know if I should do this, but I will try.
Next door, Angel.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. And
So
don't forget this. This is all the secrets right in there. Thank you so much, and good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? How you doing up in the rafters? Good? Awesome. All right. They put like a glass barrier there because we can't hear you too well. But thank you so much to Occidental College for welcoming back to a place that I always consider a home. It's really extraordinary to be back on this campus where I spent some of my most important and formative years, and to come together to discuss a common cause for all of us and every nation, how we build a more sustainable and a brighter future for each one of us. I want to thank President Veach, and I want to thank Dean Sternberg, Ambassador Scheer, who's been a friend for many, many years, the Kahane family as well, and the entire team at Occidental College for making the space and place for this today. And it's good to be amongst so many old friends and even staff members. Are we getting anything done at City Hall today? It's all good. They are a part of this, and I want to thank Deputy Mayor Nina Hachigian and her team. She was an ambassador representing the United States, most recently in ASEAN, and is the first Deputy Mayor of International Affairs in LA history, maybe one of the first in US history. And I want to thank her and her whole team for putting this all together, and really through the LA Mayor's Fund as well, connecting the pieces to make sure that with the Hilton Foundation, we could make this international translation intimate and local. And thank you, Sanjeev, as well, for the precious time that you are devoting to all of this. I hear he has a second career in warming up before sitcoms. So I would have come 10 minutes earlier, but I wanted you to some material. You got to develop it, shop it. He'll be at the Comedy Store later tonight. Please stop by. 10% off for Oxy students. And our international friends that are here, the Consuls General in particular, I want to thank everybody who's been part of really this extraordinary international community that has been so important to our city. I always think of us as a great global city, and I hope that all of our Consul Generals also do believe that this is part of their life, that this is their city and their second city. And I think every Consul General, and I don't think they're just saying to me because I'm the mayor, who's been posted all around the world, is like, I will always love LA the most, after, of course, my home country. And with this consular corps that is so engaged here, is mirrored too by the engagement in this project by the Conrad Hilton Foundation. It was at the Humanitarian Symposium, and we are so lucky to have the Hilton Foundation here, which is one of the great global foundations. It just happens to be here. And oftentimes we think about those great foundations are always other places, London, New York, maybe Washington. They are right here. And when I came back here as a professor of international relations at USC and then at Occidental, I was worried international relations wouldn't be as vibrant here, and I found the opposite to be true. This is the future of international relations based right here. And the Conrad Hilton Foundation is really always thinking about the planet a decade from now, around the corner, not just what we have today, but what we could have and enjoy tomorrow. And so I want to thank the Hilton family and all the Hilton Foundation folks as well. Now, I don't think there's many of you, but there might be one or two people in this audience that ask, why are we doing this at Occidental College, who doesn't know the proud tradition of this campus in global engagement and in connecting academia with a vibrant international duty that each of us has. Why does Oxy host United Nations Week? And then some of you may be asking, what is an SDG? And I assure you, it is something to do with the UN, nothing else. The Sustainable Development Goals are important not just for us globally, but what I hope to leave you with here today is how important this is to us locally. And this institution of higher learning has always connected those pieces seamlessly. I think that it understands that students' lives are international, It understands that the city is inherently global, and that we are connected to complete strangers around the world. In fact, our destiny depends on one another as much as it does the person sitting next to you, in front or behind you. And Oxy has the only department of diplomacy and world affairs in this nation, maybe even in this world. And so everything from global affairs, from counterterrorism, from human trafficking, from development, from sustainability, really is distilled in this campus in such an extraordinary way. And of course, students have the most amazing opportunity to have what is the finest internship program with the United Nations. A very difficult place, by the way, to do internships because of security clearances and everything else, but because Occidental is trusted, we have had this relationship for so many years, which I know has changed the lives and the directions and the professional careers of so many Occidental students. And it is a reminder when they come home of that obligation that we have to the greater world. In a similar vein to the question of why Oxy, we could be asking the question, well, why does the United States need to even be talking about Sustainable Development Goals? Why would we integrate those and talk about something the United Nations is telling us to do? Why not leave these matters to high-minded diplomats in lower Manhattan and people struggling in the developing world? And why do these nice-sounding goals even matter in our daily lives? Well, I think our response has to begin with something I used to teach in the previous incarnation of this classroom in the building. It faced a different direction. In 102, when I taught DWA 102. It's that the United Nations, first of all, was founded by this country in concert with other nations. Even through thick and thin, we have remained the largest funder of the United Nations, and it's important for us, first of all, to be engaged in this work as part of honoring that history and those obligations that we have put forward in our resources. In other words, the Sustainable Development Goals that we're talking here about today are not just about international diplomacy and development or about far-off places. They're about us. They're how we measure ourselves. You know how when you have somebody who visits you from out of town and suddenly you see LA through different eyes? It's the same thing politically. Sometimes we take for granted how great things are, and sometimes we take for granted that the bad things don't exist here until we see both of those things mirrored through people who come here. And we can't do this work abroad if we don't start in our own neighborhoods. I used to quote on the first day of the International Human Rights course I used to teach here, a very famous quote by Eleanor Roosevelt, who helped us write the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And she asked, where, after all, do basic universal human rights begin? And her answer was, in small places, close to home, the world of the individual person, the neighborhood he lives in, the school or college he attends, the factory, farm, or office where he works. And she added, without concerned citizen action to uphold these human rights close to home, we shall look in vain for progress in the larger world. A clear understanding that human rights begin with us and where we live and where we study and where we worship. She actually said in that passage, they're found in places so small that they're not found on any human map. That was before Google Maps, but still. These worlds today, these words that were from 70 years ago are still true today and should ring true for each one of you. That to help our global community, we must begin in our backyards. And vice versa, we have things to learn from the global community right here in our backyard. It is not just that we have to start locally and we earn the right to go global. We will learn things globally, and there's not a single moment in my life where I've lived or worked or studied abroad where there weren't lessons that I brought home, no matter how low income the nation was, no matter how war-torn the nation was. I remember being in the jungles of Burma when I was just after college, working with the democratic resistance that had left and college students who had taken to the streets after an election in which the democratic results had been thrown out. And they had students, fellow students, who were killed alongside them, ethnic and religious minorities, monks, other people who fled to the jungle. And I came in there thinking, well, you know, we have so much to help them with. We're going to teach human rights, let people know what their universal human rights are so they can fight and overthrow this government. And I remember recognizing this place where we had just rice and maybe one egg a day for months, that in this area where they were war-torn, where disease was higher, where the malaria rate was 100%, that there were lessons for me about the happiness of their lives, the resilience of their work, and the things that we needed to do better, that they were doing better than us. And that is the most important lesson in life, that the global lessons are always a two-way street. Our successes and failures ripple out across oceans and continents, from LA to Bogota, to Nairobi, to Mumbai, everywhere else, in the hopes that we will create a tidal wave of prosperity for everyone that sweeps up towns and large cities alike, hamlets on every single shore. After all, for dozens of nations, LA is home to the second largest population of people from that nation. We're not sure how many. It's been counted as high as 39. It may be in a few dozen. But even in some categories, we're the second largest, for instance, city of people of Mexican descent, including all of Mexico. You go to Mexico City, LA for number 2, and back to Mexico for number 3. And so we're connected to the rest of the planet by ties of family, friendship, commerce, and experience. And there's never been a more important time for cities. And cities have never been more global. We all know the statistics that a majority of human beings for the first time ever live in cities, that we come up with all the great innovations, that we come up with a large share of the economy, but we also come up with a large share of the suffering and the poverty and the pollution as well. But cities are now becoming vital international actors, just as they did in the beginning of human civilizations, when the city-state was the natural, organic, political entity. Polis comes from a Greek word that means city, but it's also the root of politics itself. People came to the city to engage in politics because it was their obligation. These organic entities, which are very different than an empire, which is the result of conquering, or a country, which is kind of an accident of history, or a state here in the United States, California, the 5th largest economy, but that's a pretty arbitrary border. A Los Angeles is natural. It is where we either are lucky enough to be born and choose to stay, or we make a decision to come to and to settle. And as city leaders, mayors and council members and other leaders face the real impacts of hunger, of homelessness, of climate change and disease. These aren't abstract things to me as a mayor. They are what keep me up at night. They are what I'm focused on every hour of every day. They're on my street. They're when I take my daughter to the library or to a park. When I drive through this town, I see it. When I feel it. On a beautiful day, I see the clear air. On a smoggy day, I see how far we still have to go. And that conversation should happen globally, not just locally. In other words, cities now are creating this network of cities that have never been as powerful. The globalism that has occurred has, yes, flattened the world, but it's also brought cities together to the point where sometimes you're talking to somebody across an ocean who's an urban leader, and you have more in common to talk to than talking to your own national leaders, hypothetically. And we're number one in so many different areas, whether it's international trade here in Los Angeles, tourism, obviously the entertainment capital of the world, we're the manufacturing center of America, foreign investment, and we're very proud of all of those number ones. More people came through LAX, more cargo through our port. It's an amazing time. The Olympics are coming here. But we're also number one in many ways we don't want to be number one. In poverty, in traffic, in homelessness. Even though our air is 90% cleaner, it's still the worst in America. So cities reflect in so many ways our hopes and aspirations and our challenges and our problems. They reflect the past and the future and the best and the worst that our history has to offer. And more cities are these connectors, these vital urban connectors between people, places where economic deals get done, places where innovation is exchanged and entrepreneurs are tied together. On Friday, I went to SpaceX to spend some time with Elon Musk, and between going down in a hole and looking at how he's completely changing through the Boring Company the way we may tunnel through the Earth, to playing with a flamethrower for a moment, it's not really a flamethrower, but to hearing what he's doing in terms of changing how we go into the heavens and how we may land on Mars. And all of the things in between shows that cities still attract those people. They distill them to come to a place to come together, the hardest working and the most innovative people. And in cities, let me be clear, we're not replacing national governments. I think a lot of that international relations stuff, when I was teaching here, they're talking about the death of the nation state. The nation state is with us for a long time. But cities are complementing, and in some places where the nation states aren't leading, we are filling the void for leadership. And I'm proud that Los Angeles stands at the forefront of this global movement and this global moment. It's a responsibility that comes to us, I think, because of our diversity, our unique geography, and our history. It's not a tough decision for me as mayor, with that context, to adopt the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations as goals for our city. Because our status as a global city didn't begin with our recent bid for the Olympics. In that bid, though, we went back in history, in 1932, when they gave the Olympics to us because it was the Great Depression and we had bid in 1924. Nobody really knew where we were in Europe, and they said, that suburb of Hollywood, give it to them, because there's nobody else who will take it. And we did, and became a global city that was recognized. And then in 1984, in the midst of the Cold War, when folks wondered whether the Olympics would survive, and they were too expensive, and we just boycotted the Moscow Olympics. Again, we stepped up with Tehran. A little revolution took care of their application, and suddenly only LA was left. And we became a great global city. And in 2028, we have this opportunity with the Olympics to become one of the most indispensable, top handful of cities in the world. And that comes not just with celebrating how great we are, but our obligations as well, to lead, to recognize our shortfalls, to fix them, and to be an example. Walk down our city's blocks and you see this globalism. You'll hear every language, we practice every religion. Pull into a strip mall in the valley where I grew up, and you'll go to a Latina-owned restaurant next to an Armenian deli. You'll exchange greetings with a first-generation Israeli, and then hail a ride with a fourth-generation Angelino that'll try to sell you their latest app, as they did to my wife yesterday in the lift. Explore our communities, and you'll see what makes this city so vibrant, culturally and intellectually. We are truly a crossroads. Our people love our neighborhoods, and yet we're connected to faraway places. Our workforce is both blue-collar and high-tech. Our industry is familiar and groundbreaking. Our economy, fueled by folks from anywhere you can imagine, from Michigan to Mazatlan. And that diversity is our strength, not just culturally, but also economically. Our foreign-born residents account for 35% of our GDP. 61% of us are either immigrants or the children of immigrants. And 63% of our Main Street businesses are opened by immigrants. As a region today, LA is now, metropolitan region, the third largest economy in the world. Let me repeat that if you don't know that. Tokyo's number one, New York is number two, and we're nipping at their heels. LA is the third largest economy in the world, if you go back to that organic sense of what a city is. 18 million people. And by the way, we're third in terms of GDP or GMP, if you want to call it municipal, but we're 20th in population. So we're really hitting above our weight class per capita as well. We boast the busiest port complex in North America. We host proudly the third largest consular corps in the world. And as I've said in the past, we are really the western capital of the United States, the northern capital of Latin America, and the eastern capital of the Pacific Rim. If we didn't have a city here, we'd probably have to build one, just given the forces of globalism. And in fact, 2 years ago, LA to China, to the east coast of China, displaced New York to London as the most significant transoceanic air corridor. And New York to London has been there basically since the beginning of transoceanic travel. And that's not going to change in our lifetimes. We are now, in many ways, the focus of this globe. And being global citizens in LA is not something I have to convince anybody in this room about. It's part of our identity. Angelinos can no more hide from the world any more than we can hide from looking at ourselves in the mirror. So pursuing and advancing the Sustainable Development Goals is our duty and a great opportunity. But let's be clear, we're not doing this just because the UN said that we should. We're doing it out of self-interest. We're doing it because it's good for us, for our people who live in this city, in this state and country. It's an opportunity for local development to bring everybody along. My economic development strategy as mayor has been pretty simple, threefold, if I had to simplify it. One, focus on key industries that are here and that are growing and that we need to attract here. Two, invest in infrastructure, things like Measure M, which thank you to all the voters in here that voted for it, the largest public transportation and road infrastructure initiative in this nation's history ×2, the airport, the port, the LA River. Invest in infrastructure. But third is make sure everybody's coming along with you. Because you can brag that you've cut unemployment in more than half, as we have in just 4 years. We can talk about how our port, as I mentioned, carries more cargo than anywhere else, or our airport is now the #1 airport of origination and destination in this nation, and arguably even in the world. But who cares? If you're unemployed or you're homeless, that's the measure. Not the nicest cars we have, but who's sleeping in a car. Not the most beautiful mansions we have, but what people can call home and what they come home to. So it's morally right, but it's also economically smart and practically necessary. So just think about what the SDGs actually are. And we'll see they sound a lot like the work that we're already doing here in Los Angeles, which makes this actually a wonderful marriage. These are standards that are set by the UN in 2015, meant to be met by 2030, so 15 years, and adopted by 193 nations, including our own, viewed as a roadmap for global development. These issues are vast and global, but their impact is personal and local. 169 targets, 241 indicators across 17 main goals, including end poverty and hunger, ensure gender equality, something with even more resonance than ever before, expand access to education, make our communities more resilient, combat climate change, promote clean water and responsible land use. The SDGs make this task seem pretty straightforward. Set these goals, government and the governed can track progress through benchmarks and clear targets to meet. It's actually how I like to govern. We came back, when I became mayor 4.5 years ago, I re-interviewed all of our general managers who lead the library and the port and the airport and the police department. I said, what are your goals? And I was blown away that the culture, that some of them had goals, but the culture had never asked for metrics, and that it was probably only a third of them that could tell me the metrics, the goals that they had. We sought to change that, and now every general manager is given a yearly review by me, and we sit down and we go through what those goals we established are, how we have been tracking them each month. And we went from unranked to #1 in this nation for open data, sharing it with journalists who can point out things like, you might have read the article about the program for police and fire pensions in the LA Times. They can find out things sometimes that we don't even see. You can share that with programmers who create apps to combat homelessness or to save water during the drought. We went from 0 to, or unranked, to the #1 digital city 3 years in a row. And just recently we came back from what the Bloomberg Philanthropies put together with 5 other groups to rank every city in America on how well they were managed by metrics. And we came in #1 in the country, the only one to get the gold standard. 8 cities got silver. Now, that's never going to make a headline, LA, gold standard, according to Bloomberg. But it is important because it is a reflection of you holding me accountable. Because you can go and see that same dashboard that I use to manage the city every single day. Check it out, dashboardlamayor.org. But anyway, by setting goals, government and the governed can continue to see that progress. And it gives us a common language around our work. And excitingly, it also gives us partners around the world who are doing the same thing, so that we get to compare ourselves with Mumbai and Nairobi. We get to compare ourselves with Paris as we both prepare for the Olympics and set goals on sustainability and economic inclusion. As a mayor, it's my philosophy, that the only way to know if we're making progress is to measure it, and that we should share that journey transparently with everybody. So the SDGs bring all of this to the table, and I see how important these are from my personal experiences as well. I joked after I left Occidental with some of my professor friends that when I was in academia, I had all the time in the world to think about complex problems. I didn't have a lot of power to directly change. I had to suggest to someone who would do it. And then I became a council member, and I had all this power to change the world and no time to think. And I said, how can we bring the best of these together? The brain of academia with the brawn and the scale of government, which has a monopoly in a good way that can reach everybody if it's doing its work well. Our partnership with Occidental and with Hilton Foundation to meet the SDGs is our way of finally bringing that marriage together, of coming up with solutions but also having the power to implement them, of marrying this power that we have of the thoughts in this room and of the work in academia with the scale of our city. So the next question we have to ask is, how are we going to do this? Well, luckily, we're not starting from scratch. By the time that the Olympic torch enters the Coliseum for the 3rd time in 2028, we want to claim victory on these goals and look ahead to what's next. And thankfully, we already have a very strong foundation. In 2014, we set forward what was called PLAN, with LA capital, P and N small. It's our sustainable city plan that looked not just at environmentalism as some sort of peripheral area for us greenies to be interested in, but a value that should wash over everything and everyone at City Hall, and included the economy and equity along with the environment as the big 3 ways to look at sustainability. Later this month, after being chosen initially by the Rockefeller Foundation and then the 100 Resilient Cities Project, we will release our resiliency plan for the city of LA. 2 years in the making, a document that commits us to plan for our adversity in the future. It's helped us do things like look at when an earthquake is going to be coming and strengthening the buildings so people don't get killed. What we do when that earthquake cuts off the 2 tunnels that 85% of our water comes from through the California and LA aqueducts by re-infiltrating water and having a second Mulholland moment to put back 50% of the water we use to draw it here locally by cleaning up things like the San Fernando Valley aquifer. We're going to build on our partnership with the World Council on City Data, our platinum status in tracking sustainable development data, and making LA a real hub around measuring and comparing success. We've committed to all sorts of goals before SDGs: workforce development, jobs for kids in the summer, reducing inequality, gender equity at City Hall, where for the first time over 50% of the commissioners are women, and there are no all-male boards or commissions left. And I did that in a single year, so when private sector says we can't do it, you always tell me that government moves slowly. You should do it too. We've done it around the environment. I chair a group called Climate Mayors, and I'm the vice chair of a global group called C40, which Mike Bloomberg started. And when the White House pulled out of the Paris Climate Accords, instead of crying in the corner or yelling at my TV, I got on the phone, and we have 391 cities, including LA, who said, if you're out, we're in. And we're going to do Paris here at the local level, measure it, help smaller towns do the same thing across America. And quite frankly, if we hadn't had a president withdraw from Paris, we might not have seen that much city action at the local level. So take it where you can get it. So we have big, bold goals, but they were incomplete. SDGs help us get a complete list. And moving forward, we will integrate and align those previous commitments with the SDGs, thanks to the generous help of Occidental and Hilton. We'll understand how our measures of local progress match up with other places, what we're doing ahead of the curve and where we're behind. And we're going to identify specific data sources that we can use to track our targets and to develop interim measures for progress. Don't just judge me after I'm gone. It's the next mayor who said, well, Garcetti committed to it. I don't know. We want you to be judging this at benchmarks all along the way and have a seamless handoff to my successor so that we can make sure these are LA goals, not the goals of an administration. And we won't just be doing it for the city. You know that this is a complicated place. If you decided to create governance in a place where 18 million people lived, in a county where 10 million did, and you chop that into 5 different counties, and then within that one county you said, let's make 88 different cities. The biggest will have 4 million, the next biggest 500,000, Long Beach. Some will have as few as 23 people, supposedly. And everything in between. We'll take the school district and the community college district in a different form of government, your air quality, your water quality. Even if you get a mosquito bite or have a rat problem, that's its own government called vector control. Nobody would have ever put together coherent government the way we've inherited it here. That said, we should be measuring what we're collectively doing. You know, not just saying the city. For instance, we always get these measures, like the city doesn't spend enough on cultural affairs. I say, well, did you include the county? Because when you get the New York measure, it's the city and county together. Well, no, that's the county. Well, they're still spending it on us. Let's not be territorial about this. Let's be generous about the private work, the nonprofit work, the county work, the school district work, the cities work, meaning plural cities, and measure that, because for all of you who live here, you don't really care where one government begins and ends. You want to make sure that that child of yours that goes to school and rides the bus and then goes to a park, maybe touching 3 different governments, but it's one child and needs to have that be seamless. And so we have to destroy those silos as we pursue our SDGs as well. Look at the full horizon. And that's the kind of cooperation that's not good just to measure our progress. It's good for how we will govern. It's good for how we can have a city that truly is, you know, like most of the problems we face, borderless. You know, traffic doesn't stop just because you're at one city border. Air quality doesn't stop. Crime doesn't stop. All of the economic development, we live in certain cities, work in other ones, so we need to start thinking that way to look at LA as well. So we are going to lastly say, while we're looking at everybody, we're not going to point to somebody else to say it's their responsibility, not ours. We will lead and say it is our mutual responsibility. This is a space I occupy every single day with the issue of homelessness, my biggest focus and our biggest challenge. We're the homeless capital of America, decades in the making. I could very easily say, hey, it's not my responsibility, and it's a pretty honest answer. Mental health care, any anti-addiction programs, our veterans programs, trauma-informed programs, all this stuff is either state or county. The city doesn't have any direct departments to do that. But I'm the mayor of this town, and tents on the sidewalks where I live are my responsibility. And so together with Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas, we campaigned for 2 different measures. One where he campaigned as a supervisor for the city, which has the power to build housing, to pass Measure HHH, which will build 10,000 units of housing over this next decade for people on the street. And vice versa, we campaigned for Measure H, the county measure, will provide services in those homes, because you can build an apartment, but if somebody isn't cured from the challenges they face, they're going to fall back out on the street. So I hope all of you hear that whether you're a student here today, whether you're a consul general, whether you're a college president, like all of us have responsibilities to each one of these goals. And in fact, more than responsibilities, we have power. And at this moment, when so many people are trying to make you feel powerless, don't cede the power you have before you exercise it. You want to end homelessness? You could adopt a family. You could get your church or your synagogue to have a place where RVs can park instead of being on the street and get people into services. That's power that you have today. You have power, the men in this room, to share power you have, to make sure that women have the same opportunities and girls have the same opportunity that you. That's power. You have power to make choices as consumers about what you do for a more sustainable future. So all of the things I want us to all commit to together. This is not a mayor saying I'll commit to it and you check back in as kind of a patron-client relationship. We are part of a community and I'm honored to lead, but I'm going to be following you as well on a lot of the progress we made. You know, when we look at that, we've seen that sort of leadership begin to blossom in LA. You know, who treats more medical emergencies than anyone else in this town? Even though I said it was the county's responsibility because they have the hospitals. Our firefighters and paramedics. Our senior centers, we have dance and wellness programs that people rely on. Our kids learn from sports in our parks. So of course, health is a part of my responsibility as mayor. And I'm going to be held accountable for health indicators in my city just as much as the county is. In a similar way, if we all hold ourselves accountable to meeting these SDGs, I know the power of this city to be able to meet those goals, maybe even surpass them. So SDGs are global for a reason. These challenges know no boundaries, just as I said, inside a city, globally. Zika virus, greenhouse gases, forced migration, international crime. These challenges also reject borders that leaders so desperately try to erect, when instead we should be figuring out how we make the connections to globally together solve them. We're so proud to be launching as part of this effort also a peer network of cities that will tie these visions together, just as it has for global climate change, just as it has for the Olympics with Paris, as I mentioned. And we realize that cities connected are an incredibly powerful force in the world today and for the world tomorrow. They help us keep each other honest. We find best practices. I always joke mayors are just a bunch of thieves. We come up maybe one idea that's our own, and then 1,000 that we just steal from cities that we see. And that's good, because we add a little something each time to it, but we build on a mutual foundation that isn't about individual actors, it's about collective work. And today I'm so proud we have representatives here in the audience on board from some of the cities in this mission, from South America, from South Asia, from East Africa, from around the United States. And all of us see the SDGs as another perfect opportunity to collaborate on big ideas and to achieve big things. And we see that the real effort globally on achieving SDGs has to happen where people live. And increasingly, that's in cities. I'm very proud to be an American, but I'm also very proud of our global responsibilities and connections. It's a weird thing as an Angelino, I never actually had to articulate that. Because growing up in LA, you see the face of the world on the streets of this city, which prepared me for when I went to the streets of the world, I saw the face of LA in those places. I could be in Cairo or Nairobi, or I could be in Bangkok. I could be in Mexico City and at once just feel at home. It wasn't a thing. It was just what we know. And I understand that our countries are strongest when we have that vision inside all of them, that the challenges we face are things that walls cannot contain. Ultimately, for me, this is a selfish undertaking. My first job is to take care of you in this city. Secondly, to build a stronger America. Third, to be part of an engaged world. And I agree with the current administration that we do need strength in the world. I think that's critically important. I just disagree with them about how you measure strength. It was here in the classrooms of this campus where we developed the basic discussions around global politics that we know that power comes in many ways. Yes, it can come from aircraft carriers, but can also come from cultural strength. You know, the way that people want to be like you because you stand for something. It can be measured in so many different ways, and here in Los Angeles, where we're not immune from measuring things by how nice that car or mansion is, we have to remind ourselves that we have to get back to looking in those places where we will see what we have not done, the work that remains undone. It's not reflected by our best restaurants. it's reflected by who's hungry. This isn't about policy. This is about people. This isn't about numbers. This is about narratives. And each one of you has one unique thing in this room, your narrative. Nobody else has it. No one else will ever have it. And it isn't about us hitting the right numbers. It's making sure those narratives reach the potential for yourself, for your friends and family and community, and for the strangers alongside whom you live with. And what counts isn't keeping political promises. I don't think there's a lot of political upside in the United States of America to be a city saying, hey, yeah, we're doing the UN SDGs. But I believe them deeply because it's about unleashing human potential. And I don't want to leave any of that behind, not in my city. I always try to shoot for the stars, whether it's in our efforts to try to end homelessness on the streets of LA, to bring gender equity to our city, to build 15 rapid transit lines at once, the most a city's ever undertaking, a brand new airport, making LA the healthiest city in America. These are big goals. But we go big because reaching for these commitments, by going big, it means upholding our promises not just to ourselves, but for our children and our grandchildren. We go big because we want to build a better community and a better legacy to hand over to those generations ahead. We go big because we should give our children better than what we ourselves inherited. And when you add up everything that we strive to do, when you tally the steps towards meeting the Sustainable Development Goals, the human equation, the human being, is all that matters. We and these goals are not individual stars in the sky. We are constellations. And it is the connections between us, with another city, with another person here, with somebody who looks differently, who's a different age, who practices their religion separately from us, who looks at their life maybe through a different lens. It is how well we connect those stars together that define us. And if we do our jobs right, we can realize that our common vision of what our cities can be, defined by justice, won by all, equality, cherished by everyone, prosperity shared everywhere, and rights afforded to every human being, that is worth fighting for. And I look forward to tackling these things together. Thank you very much. Thank you. Unless you need to stretch, sit down. Thank you. Thank you, thank you.
So I promised we would be inspired. I want you also to tweet at hashtag global goals, at hashtag Occi4SDGs, and the mayor of LA. Hashtag mayor of LA.
Yeah, right. At Mayor of LA.
So we're going to open the floor for some questions from our amazing students. I'm going to start over here.
Hi. Kanan? Great major, good choice. Awesome. Yes. Good to see you too. Where were you at the UN? Yeah? Awesome. Yeah. Sure. Thank you, and good to see you. Congratulations on the internship, and welcome home. Don't ever leave. The Olympics is this kind of magic dust that makes people do things that otherwise we wouldn't rationally do. What do I mean by that? If I just told you, hey, by 2028, let's all get together and have a party for 17 days, and oh, by the way, end homelessness, accelerate our rapid transit lines, build a few 100,000 units of housing to make our rents more affordable, reduce our global emissions. Like, a bunch of us in this room would want to, but the average person would be like, I'm busy with my life. But Olympics somehow, and this was my experience as a little kid in 1984, was that it inspires us to reach out further. I think part of that is because we're realizing the whole world's going to come and see us, and we want to put on, our best outfit. But we also, I think, want to challenge ourselves. And I think the Olympics are going through a lot of transition. We always get the Olympics at one of these transition points. And LA's always been a games changer. Not a game changer, but a games changer. Like, it was here in 1932, we had the first Olympic Village. And used, I don't know, photo finishes for the first time and the first podiums ever for medals. In '84, it was the most profitable games ever, and we put that money back into youth sports. So, for instance, we built a tennis center in Compton, and Serena and Venus Williams played there as kids. Russell Westbrook was part of an NBA program, or a basketball program before he was in the NBA that was funded from those Olympic dollars, and they keep giving those proceeds. So when I thought about 2028, most cities would be very rational not to bid on the Olympics because the requirements of the Olympics to build a village and or a big stadium are just, it's not worth it for 17 days. Unless your national government wants to do it out of its pride, it's a very expensive undertaking. We're the only country in the world that doesn't subsidize its Olympics. So every city's on its own. And most cities like Boston, who got the first nod to be our official one, kind of the people looked at it and said, this is a lemon. You know, why should we be doing that when we could be spending, give me a couple $1 billion, don't talk about neighborhood revitalization for the Olympics, because that's only going to be what's best for the Olympics. Give me $2 billion and I can do that in a neighborhood tomorrow, but don't call it the Olympics. Here, we're different. UCLA has enough housing, or will have enough housing, to be an Olympic Village, which, like a campus like this, is great and robust, and the trees are grown, and the plumbing works, and I mean, I hope the plumbing works here for you. But, you know, there's good food and all that stuff. We have the Rams Stadium being built because we played chicken with the NFL for 20 years, and they finally blinked, and they're building it on their dime, not any taxpayer dollars. So we have the two most expensive things taken care of. So to me, the challenge is, what do we want to leave behind as our legacy? And I think first and foremost, it's returning the Olympics not to be an urban planning exercise. Barcelona is beautiful, London is amazing, but then there's also Rio and Athens and places that have been more challenged with the post-Olympic buildings that they have that aren't being used. Here, our sports stuff gets used all the time, so we can focus those dollars, which we will make, on what I think the Olympics are about, fitness and health and potential. So we negotiated money ahead of time, and we'll start spending that on kids this year to give more access to sports, just as we did with us Williams sisters. Did you know in Los Angeles City, when I became mayor, when we first looked at it, only 25% of the participants in our park sports programs were girls. 75% were boys. So that's crazy. And when we kind of dug deep down, it was in more working class families, had to make tough decisions. 70 or 80 bucks or $100 might not seem like a lot to play sports for a couple months. For a lot of families, it's a lot. So they're picking the boys over the girls, and you know, families that had brothers and sisters. And we're now in our last quarter, we brought that up to 45% by just offering more to girls, not taking anything away from boys. So I want the Olympics to leave that behind, which is that, you know, everybody has universal access to sports and doesn't have to worry about paying for it. That then we breed a culture of health and fitness. Second to that is kind of our sustainability. We want this to be the first energy positive games. We'll actually put more energy from sustainable sources back into the grid than we will use during the games. Third, we'll accelerate jobs and equity around that so that youth jobs, people of color, women-owned businesses, veterans, disabled veterans, others will get a lot of the business of the things that we will spend money on. Fourth will be culture and arts. We got the opera in 1984 out of it, the murals that you see around freeways and stuff. What is our cultural moment going to look like in 2028? And then last, this is our first Paralympic Games. I shouldn't even just call it the Olympics. It's the Olympics and the Paralympics. In '84, we had the first wheelchair race in the Olympics, and that became the Paralympics. For inclusion and overcoming impediments, which we all have in one way or another, this is a moment for the city to be that example to the world. SDGs speak about some of that, but I think the Olympics will really help us accelerate it. Did anybody see the ad in the Super Bowl, the Toyota ad yesterday? It was of a baby being born, and she didn't have feet. And it just showed this baby growing up and becoming one of the Paralympian skiers. You know, it was like 1 in 5 billion chance, and then it was suddenly 1 in, 1 billion, and each thing that she was doing, she came down to being, a multi-gold medal winner in skiing. And I think that message is going to be really important for the city. So those are the 5 areas we'll be looking at a legacy for the Olympics.
Can you take one more?
Sure, I can take 2. I'll be shorter.
That's okay. Actually, we have one in the back that I
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I'll let you.
Sharon. And then I also want to just say to everyone, after the mayor leaves, we have a fantastic panel with Deputy Mayor Jigian and city leaders from around the world. So do stay.
Hi. You mean what we'll do between now and then, or after they're done? Right. Right. Sure. I don't want to just hit these goals and say, okay, check, so we can focus on the other. We are very good at doing multiple things all at once. So if we reach one, I think we should raise those bars. For instance, College Promise, which you mentioned, we became the largest city in America to make community college free first year for full-time students graduating from LAUSD. In the first year, it boosted LAUSD attendance. This year was the first year, full-time from LAUSD to community colleges by 40%, and a 14% overall boost in their entire student population. That helped the state then say, we're going to do California College Promise, and they're paying for the first year. So I could have met my goal. Now I'm saying, well, why don't we take our money and pay for the second year, if we can raise that again, to make it 2 full years so people can get their AA degree, move on to a 4-year college, or get their job credentials. So I think we have to, whenever we hit something, there's something we're missing. I mean, gender equity isn't going to be measured by one thing. It's measured by everything. You're going to find some place where there's still gender inequity. So I think with each of these, they should inspire action for people who work in this area, that's one important measure, but not the only one. So I hope that people will see the SDG as kind of this like giant trunk with the main branches, but we've got a lot of leaves and flowers on that tree that are part of the Sustainable City Plan, a part of my youth employment goals, my gender equity goals, all of those things in the city. And you should help and really push for, if I can have you be organizers and angry constituents, make sure the county, make sure the city that you live in, if you're outside the city of LA, but in this area, make sure the school district, make sure the community college district is adopting some of these too. Because it's one thing if I say, it's another thing if you go in and say, look, I voted for you in the community college board, or I live in your town, I expect you to adopt these too. I can do one more. Hi. Of course. Huh. Awesome. Great. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It was interesting, and you see these things change very quickly. They change quickly for us when we realize we're bad in a certain area, and they change quickly in other nations. I mean, just look at, for instance, People's Republic of China is critical to our world success. And when we had the historic agreement between President Obama and President Xi on global climate change and emission reduction, at that time, one of the planks of that agreement was that cities would come together between U.S. and China and figure this out. Well, I called the White House and said, hey, we'd love to host that here. What's the plan? They're like, well, we don't really have one yet, but we're going to work that out. And we just kind of went into that space because cities are very comfortable with each other, and we offered to host, and they went through a whole thing. And long story short, LA hosted the first U.S.-China Climate Leaders Summit. So we had about a dozen U.S. mayors and about a dozen Chinese mayors. And it was at that, this was before Paris, it was at that meeting here in LA that Guangzhou and Beijing said they'd cap their emissions at 2020 instead of 2030. That was the single biggest piece of environmental news in the world that year, just given the populations of those countries and the leadership roles in their nation. And it was a sea change from 20 years ago, where understandably Chinese government was saying, wait a second, we can't even think about the environment. We're like still dealing with crushing poverty and other issues. But now, in some ways, they've sometimes leapfrogged us. And then I hope we will have at the national level again sometime, but we certainly are collectively leapfrogging things they're doing. And that competition is really healthy for cities to be inspired by one another. I think that you're going to have constituents, if this news gets out about LA, you're going to have constituents in Manila, and you're going to have constituents in, Delhi, and you're going to have constituents in Amman who are saying, well, why aren't you guys doing this too? LA is. And I think that will be really good because it will add pressure in those places to similarly do this. So thank you guys for being a start of a revolution, not just for the city, but I think that can sweep across this globe. Thank you all so much. Thank you. Okay.
We're going to take a short break, about 10 minutes while we set up for the panel, and then you're all invited to stay. No? No break, no break. Don't leave. Don't leave while we move the chairs. Don't leave.
We're going to get started in 2 minutes, everyone. Hey.
How are you? Good to see you. No, you're good. Thank you so much. It's really inspiring. From around the world, huh?
Correctly that you were the person who talked to you about the Olympics in Los Angeles. Do you have a card or something? I don't. Okay. Is there like a way I can contact you? I'm actually doing my thesis on the Olympics, so I was hoping that I could maybe connect with you about
Let me just
that.
get him into the next room, and then if you're going to stick around for the panel,
Yeah.
I'll find you.
Okay, great. Sounds good.
What's your
Thank you
name?
so much. Amanda.
Amanda.
Yeah.
Last name?
Seidner.
Seidner. Okay. Do you go to Occidental?
Yeah, I do. Thank you so
I work a lot
much.
with Sam Jake too, so you can always.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Can I say a quick thing?
I hope so too. Okay, see you guys. Thanks so much. See you soon.
Thanks so much. You'll figure out how to get that picture.
Right. I'm setting up an hour. I'm going to
Okay, yes. The best team funder. Yes. So I'm part of the main.
What can I say? Had we won, I wouldn't be here.
If our student
Brother Sharon, correct. Yeah, okay. We're going to be out there in March.
So I did visit with your office last week. And it was, yes, I did. And yes,
Okay, excellent. We're all in.
Okay, could the panelists come up to their nice chairs? Why don't you just, are you going to be here?
Am I going to be here?
Yeah, then hold it. Okay, we're going to begin. So this panel is meant to be a quick tour of the world and what different cities are doing on the topic that the mayor just addressed. And I'm going to very briefly introduce the panel, not give long bios. And in the context of their remarks, they can add in any relevant backstories or funny anecdotes about themselves, because I want to have as much time for substantive discussion. And after each panelist had talked a little bit about some aspect of an initiative or project that they're working on in their city, and then how international diplomacy is connecting them up with other cities, we'll have as much question and answer discussion, make this as informal as possible. Afterwards, the lunch is where, Sanjeev? Okay, out that way. There'll be lunch, and there'll be lots of opportunity for you to buttonhole individual members of the panel and follow up. First, I have a diplomatic duty. I have to present the very handsome little SGG pin to Deputy Mayor Ambassador Nina Hachigian. And I'm not going to pin it on because that only leads to trouble. So,
Thank you.
Nina.
Now it's official.
Yeah, it's official. Nina is ambassador. She was President Obama's ambassador to ASEAN, and she was also a leading policy analyst. So she's not just a friend of the president or a big donor. She's actually someone who comes from the world of policy and substance. And as the mayor said, she is the first deputy mayor for international affairs in the city's history, and we believe still the only deputy mayor for international affairs, at least, in the United States. And sadly, showing my age, I'm going to put on my glasses so I don't mess this up. So, Philip, and tell me if I get the pronunciation right, Tigo is the senior advisor in the office of the deputy president in Kenya, and no one should ask him about political events currently in Kenya involving the media or anything else. He's going to talk about the SDGs when it's his turn. Welcome, Philip. Nidhi Chowdhury is from Mumbai. She's the Deputy Municipal Commissioner. Are you elected, Nidhi? Huh? Not elected, you're appointed. Not so far. Needless to say, large cities in India have a lot of challenges, and it's going to be great to hear from you about your work. Carlos Cisneros is from Mexico City, and another challenging city for those of you who have been there. So we look forward to hearing what you're going to tell us from the Mexico City Administrative Office. Then Carrie. Carrie, is it Romanoff or Romanow? Romanow is from the city of San Jose. She's the Director of Environmental Services and Chief Sustainability Officer. And we welcome you from Northern California. We're all part of the West Coast Liberated Zone here. think the mayor is the unofficial leader of the West Coast Liberated Zone. And from the liberated city of New York, Alexandra Hineker, who's the Strategic Relations Manager in the Mayor's Office for International Affairs. So welcome to the panelists. We're going to start with Nina and then just go along and, as I say, talk a little bit about what you are doing and how you're also using your international connections to do it better.
Well, we're a relatively new office. We've started in September, and so we have a lot to learn. I'm really excited about this SDG effort. And for me personally, I'm interested not in any one of the particular goals, but the gaps. Because we're starting to do this measuring to see how our plans, our sustainability plan, our resilience plan, and other plans we have, track with the SDGs. And so I'm interested in where we're not paying enough attention. And I think that the SDG framework is going to be terrific for that. So we can learn as a city. And it'll also, I think, make it easier to speak a common language and share lessons with other cities around the world. We already do a fair amount of that, and I think that's what, coming from the federal government, what's really inspiring about city partnerships is how much we can directly, immediately learn from one another. So last week, I was in a meeting with our Chief Resilience Officer and the Chief Resilience Officer from Mexico City, and we had this very practical conversation about how we want to learn how to do early warning for earthquakes better, and they want to learn how to protect their water infrastructure during earthquakes better. And so we're paired in what we want to learn from one another. The other thing that the SDGs, I think, brings up for me is the fact that I think we have more partners than we think we do, and more cities that we can learn from than we think we do. Because, we often think about the developed versus the developing world, but when you look at our homeless population, there's no water and electricity. And so, what are other places with large vasts of people with no water and electricity doing about bringing those services? So I think we have a lot to learn all around. So that's a big part of what our portfolio is. We're also looking at international trade and investment as another piece. And of course, the Olympics and how we track progress toward this city or toward the Olympics as we go forward. I'll leave it at that.
Good morning. Good morning. I thought everybody was fired up. Like, good morning. I should be sleeping. Actually, it's like almost midnight in Nairobi, so you really have no excuse. My name is Thigo Philip. I probably need coffee. My name is Thigo Philip. I'm with the presidency of the Republic of Kenya, but I have a very unique role. So I'm the first data innovation advisor, like you. and my work is really to look across government, both national and county, but also to bring in capacities from private sector. For example, we're the leapfrog capital of the world. We have a very large innovation community. Our mean age is 19.1. The whole country, so we're a very young country, but also a very young city. And so I think our task has basically been to see how to engage young people on the goals, because ultimately the goals are for them. Some of us may just not be there in 15 to 20 years. I think also the second bit is that for those who do not know the genesis of the SDGs, actually were led by our ambassador, Macharia Kamau. So for us, and he's following on Twitter. He's been retreating from morning, so I have to be careful what I say so that I don't let him down. I think basically is that between Kenya, Ireland, and Hungary, we basically began the open working group. So that was a very different methodology of how you set global goals. And that is something that I think speaks a lot about how we see it, I think, from Kenya. The second bit was the intergovernmental process, which was also not very closed, based on his leadership in Ireland. So I think our case is basically we have no excuse as a country. So anything that is progressive and transformative, Kenya will be there. And for us, it was almost obvious that we would answer to the call of the cities that want to be champions around implementing SDGs at a local level. So as the moderator mentioned, we are part of a lot of initiatives that are quite transformative. So part of the Global Partnership on Sustainable Development Data. For us, that's critical because whatever is counted gets done. But also it means that, especially in cities, we have a lot of people who are really invisible, and for us, data becomes that kind of tool that begins to visualize those who are not really necessarily have been part of development progress. The other bit is that I think we're part of connecting philanthropy with government, with civil society. So how do we bring in a group of people who can actually help support the SDGs? We know that we have a very big financial gap, and it is our realization that no one person can do it alone, whether it's money or capacities. And so how do we do this? How do we put this together? We're also part of this SDG Compacts, which is also a new idea that leverages on Gala. And the idea is, how do we create ambition? We know 2030 won't just happen until we put ambitious targets that actually will be markers. I mean, we do not want to be part of a super sustainable development goals in 2030. We are tired of these things being named every 15 years. I think we have to be honest and realistic in terms of, if we really have to create sustainable change, then let's put some ambition. Even though the SDGs are globally agreed, I think countries like Kenya know that we can push the button a bit on how we need to do these things. And lastly, I think for us is really also to understand that we are not starting on a clean slate, and that's our reality. That the challenges that are being plagued now are challenges that plagued us during our independence. And I think for us, we've been blaming many people. We've been blaming the British for colonizing us and leaving us legacy systems. We've been blaming too many people around the structural adjustment programs, but I think the SDGs are finally knocking on our doors and saying, listen, development is really in your own hands. And the idea is, how do we recognize that everybody has a role to play? You can't be poor, but you have something to do about it. You can dream, you can lend your energies. We are part of initiatives around universities. I think for us, we don't necessarily look at cities. We also look at how academia like Oxy, MIT can actually reach out to capabilities around knowledge, or knowledge institutions in Africa. We produce the least books, we have the least literature around these issues. We struggle a lot in terms of just finding baselines, for example. So how do we collectively understand that we can build knowledge across? We can leverage on capabilities. You can use our leapfrogging capabilities in terms of learning, in terms of bridging the gender gaps that the mayor had mentioned. So I think for me, that's why I'm excited to be here. And every time I hear collaboration, it's like I just show up. Anytime I hear multi-stakeholder, you see me there. So if you see multi-stakeholder collaboration, you see me there. Anytime I hear youth, for the young people in the room, hands, if you consider yourself young. I knew Paul would raise his hand. And I know Sanjeev would. So basically, we are here as Kenya, and as a resident of Nairobi, I'm very excited to see how we move this forward.
Namaste, Occidental College. I'm thankful for this opportunity. I am representing Mumbai Municipal Corporation. We are the city government for the largest city of India, and as already been told that larger the city, larger the problems. And Mumbai has a population of 15 million people and just 500 square kilometer area, so we can understand the density that Mumbai is having. And many of the people in our country have already started saying that Mumbai has become dead or is dying. So in a city which has been claimed to be dying, how to rejuvenate that city, looking into these sustainable development goals and ensuring that the city survives, because like LA is a city of hopes, as Mayor told, Mumbai has been a city of dreams for rest of India. So we in Mumbai Civic Corporation, although believe that there is no absolute poverty in Mumbai, what we have in Mumbai is relative poverty. Mumbai also is home to the richest people of India, is also home to 40% of its population which lives in slum-like conditions. So it is here where the challenges of sustainable development goal of providing access to clean water, access to clean energy, access to sanitation facilities, access to affordable housing in slum population, true slum population, is the biggest challenge that we are facing at present. And we actually need to work on that constantly for a longer time to go. I, as an administrator for the city, can understand and appreciate that 2030 probably would be a very, it is not impossible. Like you said, impossible becomes probable. We believe that it actually is probable to achieve these goals. There is no absolute poverty, there is no absolute hunger, but there is malnutrition, there is relative poverty which we need to tackle too. We have provided access to clean water to slum populations to a very large extent, but it is not at household level. We have provided sanitation facilities, especially after the present Prime Minister of India. He introduced the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan in 2014, and which is now a mission-oriented scheme for the city of Mumbai. Still, the sanitation facilities are not at household level. It is the community sanitary facilities that are being provided to slum population. However, when I look at all these goals, if one particular goal that comes to the city corporation as a topmost priority for it would be basically gender equality, because this is one thing that cuts across all the goals, all 17 goals. If gender equality is provided, would definitely bring in probably impact on poverty, impact on climate change, impact on access to water, sanitation, energy. All these facets can be tackled if we start realizing that there are different needs for gender. I'm really happy that Mayor also said that only 25% of girls were having access to sports facilities in the city of LA. So when we look at Mumbai, only 20% of our population, our women population, are participating in workforce. So this is something we want to change. This is something we really are keen on doing. And as a corporation, we have incorporated it into the land use planning, the urban planning, the development plan. We have demarcated land for purposes which are meant for women, like women working hostels, women skill centers, crèches for women at different places. So this is one aspect which I'm like very keen on seeing whether Mumbai can actually be a city, a role model for the rest of the world in making it a safe and a very gender sensitive and equitable city for the world. And we would definitely like to learn a lot from cities like LA, Nairobi, Mexico. And this collaboration, I believe, will go a long way. Thank you. Dhanyawad.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carlos Ibarra, as you've heard before. I'm the Executive Director for Institutional Estrangement. So I would like you to do two things for me. First of all, please don't cross your legs and don't cross your arms. Let me tell you why. The question was the first, what are we doing here in Mexico to make international collaboration? Well, the first thing is this. We take all the borders off, okay? So legs and arms are the first borders that we make. And secondly, please raise your hand. All of you, raise your hand. One hand, okay? Now search north. Where is the north? Point it, point it. We have no idea where the north is. So pretty much what do we have to do, and what we are doing is, as international community, to face north. And this is one way to do it. So we're taking the 17 goals in Mexico to frame it. What we do is to, first, we place the person at the center of it, and then we divide it in the ministries where all we are connecting them. And then we are multiplying our estrangement as a government. So first, if let's see this. What are the difference between Nogales, Arizona, and Nogales, Sonora? Pretty much are on the same territory. The soil is pretty much the same, but the differences between the two communities are huge. Why? Why is that? And the question will be the strengthening of the institutions. Because of that, we have to take this framework as a guideline to keep working as every day to make these goals an achievement and make everything better for us. So pretty much this is the first question I would like to answer. And thank you very much. I will explain more that what we're doing here in Mexico, because we just made a new constitution in Mexico City. So thank you very much.
So where was North? Thank you. Perfect. Good afternoon. I'm Carrie Romano with the City of San Jose. I'm joined by our Assistant Director, Ashwini Kantek. So both of us are here for the next 2 days, today and tomorrow, and happy to answer any questions or learn from you all. In San Jose, we are bringing forward this month the Climate Smart San Jose plan, and that is Climate Smart San Jose, a people-centered plan for a low-carbon city. In the next 20-ish years, San Jose will grow by 40%. So we'll add the equivalent of inviting the city of Oakland to come live in San Jose. So we need to figure out how to do that in a responsible manner because the people will be coming to San Jose. So part of the plan is to do it in a way that helps us achieve the Paris Climate Accords. And one of the real opportunities that the SDG framework offers us, as well as Climate San Jose, is a framework to have a conversation. So really what we're trying to do in San Jose is to create a movement where our community participates more, where they understand the interrelationships, that to install solar panels on your home is great, but if there are homeless people who don't have food and are also don't have wastewater treatment and are degrading the waterways, we're not really necessarily making material progress by installing those solar panels. So how do we make sure that everyone in the entirety of our million-plus population is moving forward together? So it's not just for some, it's for everyone. And it's that conversation, I think, that's going to help us achieve all of those goals over time because as everyone has communicated, they are connected. There's not, you can't just focus on poverty and not environmental improvement. You can't just focus on education and not equality. They are all connected, and as long as we keep that in mind and realize that we actually don't have a direct path to the goal yet, but our plan, Climate Smart San Jose, is a database plan. So it's taking our general plan and quantifying what implementing that will get us and how much more we need to do to reduce our carbon footprint by 6.5% year over year for the next 20-odd years, and be excited about that opportunity. So lots of work to do, lots of fun to have, and looking forward to learning from you all.
Sure. My name is Alexandra Hineker, and I'm with New York City Mayor's Office for International Affairs. And I first want to say what a pleasure it is to be here with all of these representatives from the different cities, and also from Kenya, because as you mentioned, Ambassador Kamau played such an important role in ushering in the SDGs through the negotiation process. I'd also like to thank the City of Los Angeles and Occidental College for bringing us all together. So the original question was how we adopted the SDGs as a city. And I want to note that in the case of New York City, we came at it a little bit of a different way. It's not that we adopted the SDGs, but rather that New York City, in April of 2015, agreed to a sustainable development strategy called One NYC. So in September 2015, when 193 countries agreed to the Sustainable Development Goals, we recognized that the complementarity between these two agendas, and we established a program that I manage called Global Vision Urban Action. And Global Vision Urban Action identifies, I have a booklet, the synergies between our Sustainable Development Strategy and the global goals. In other words, New York City didn't adopt the SDGs, but rather we use it as a means to communicate how we are contributing to global efforts to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And as for a goal that New York City has prioritized in particular, I'd say that Mayor de Blasio has made it clear
from the outset that equity is at the core of his agenda. So like other speakers before have mentioned, there's a big difference between providing clean water or quality education or access to green space to some of the residents of a city and providing it to all of the residents of a city. And so in New York City, we're setting out to achieve the latter. This is, of course, one of the innovations of the SDGs as well, the idea of not leaving anyone behind, and that we're all collectively responsible for ensuring that everyone has the same access to the benefits of all of these goals. So I look forward to hearing from all of you about what you're doing and sharing a little bit more about our priorities over the next 2 days and also in the coming months and years. Thank you.
You guys, you can hold the mic because I have a pretty loud voice. We're going to ask our lovely assistant, Zach Solomon, who has the mic, to be available to take it. No, who has the mic? I thought he's the student body president. Okay, Velocity has it. When you ask a question, you can direct it to the panel or to an individual, and then please kind of identify yourself. And I think one of the questions you might press the panel on is we have these lofty goals, we have commitments, but what's the intersection between the politics, both at the top, strong leadership, the way we have in the mayor, but also the pressure from the grassroots and the citizens who are kind of asking that these things be done. Who would like, and any of their colleagues from the diplomatic corps? Anyone? Would you like? Yes. Or distinguished professor.
Well, I mean, this was a wonderful set of comments. I have one particular. I'm a teacher, well, a professor. They call us professors, but we teach actually at Columbia University. My name is Saskia Sassen. So, New York. So I look at finance, right? High finance, radically different from traditional banking. But basically, finance should be thought of as an extractive sector. I don't want to elaborate on that. I'll talk about that tomorrow. But we now know that some of those empty buildings that you see in many of our major cities, it's not just New York, it's also London, it's also a set of other cities. Those cities are actually, those empty buildings, we're talking very fancy high-end buildings, are delivering more profits than if they were being rented out or sold. Why? Because they can be used as asset, like a wall, a toilet, a whole floor, an asset-backed security, which is what the high finance sector wants. Now, when I look at this particular little wrinkle, you know, this is a major threat to the whole notion of urbanity. And so I'm just wondering if anybody in your team, and if not, then I will come visit you, is working on this. We have a housing crisis on the one hand, and there are many traditional elements, but now there is this new wrinkle, and this wrinkle is growing very fast. When you look at the value of financialized buildings, which is the minority of buildings in the world, but it is $250 trillion and growing very fast. So this represents a real sort of economic input for which we have no law, for which we have no recognition, like most economists don't even know this is happening. You know, anyhow, but it should be said, this is not economics, this is algorithmic mathematics we're talking about. Has nothing to do with economics, certainly not microeconomics. So I'm just curious, you can give me a very short answer. I realize I spoke a lot. I apologize for that.
Sure. Well, when I agreed to this panel, I didn't realize that my first question would be from Saskia Sassen, asking me about the detailed economic policies of my city. Okay. Well, I will be fully upfront and say I don't know about a specific policy addressing that, but what I do know is what I emphasized in my initial remarks, is that we are absolutely committed to this idea of equity, and we're looking at it in this plan in a lot of different ways. What does equity mean in terms of access to resources, in terms of education, in terms of having good transportation and housing? And I can't say for sure that our city's looked into that yet, but you're most welcome to come speak to the relevant representatives. But what I can say is that we are absolutely dedicated at looking for these gaps and making sure that all residents of New York City have access to the same opportunities.
I don't even know if I know what algorithmic mathematics are, but thank you. I mean, it poses something for us to look into as we get home. I know in San Jose we have taken over empty hotels and motels, and we're using those to house homeless, and we're continuing to look, and we've done inventories of what are all the available spaces and what would it take to bring those to fruition. But I think from my perspective of curiosity is I'm wondering why the financial institutions place that value. And so I'd want to learn more about that and then say, what can we do to influence that? Because that needs to shift. So if maybe there's some disincentives that we can put in. Yeah.
I have a question, which is, is there a city that's addressing this effectively, and how are they doing so?
My experience, and I do go around the world and I do talk with a lot of people, is that they're not aware of this. This is a fairly recent development. Mind you, it goes back 2 or 3 years. It's not new. Because the first step always in these big, buildings often is, how do I clean my dirty capital? We know that, or it's just an investment. But the irony then is that your average person in New York, in London, we are talking about 12 cities where you see this worldwide, is they say, oh, poor people, they put their money in there and now they can't rent out. Well, it's not. And so we need to go digging, into these multiple realities that are really operative in our big cities. So.
We won't even touch on global money laundering in this session. I know. We're shocked that there's global money laundering going on.
It's really tough to follow a question by Saskia Assassins. My name is Rosalind, and I'm a senior here at Oxy. I'm a Diplomacy and World Affairs major. And my question's for anyone on the panel. In regards to civil society actors and civil society organizations, a lot of the work that's at the pillars of the SDGs has been taken into the hands of civil society actors and organizations, and I'm wondering how that work is being integrated into the accomplishment of the SDGs and what sort of partnership is being fostered.
Before I pass to you, I just wanted to mention you're not the only son of Kenya who's been in this room. His name was Barry Obama, and his father was Kenyan. He did study here, and he did well later in life.
He's my relative. We can all claim that. But I have my colleagues. Elizabeth is from the county. You can just stand. And Priscilla, somewhere there, with the camera, very busy. She's also from Kenya, so we have 4 Kenyans who've been in this room. So a couple of things. I think perhaps, and this is why I say perhaps Kenya is really at an advantage. I think because of our engagement from the get-go of the SDGs, we'd also thought about how civil society would be engaged. And in our case, we have what we call an SDG platform, SDG forum that civil society have actually put together. And interesting enough is their work has been to look at the gaps where government has not necessarily planned to engage. For example, engagement with parliamentarians. So unlike cities, legislature was not necessarily engaged in SDGs planning. And during the MDGs, that was also the biggest gap that was there. The other bit, of course, is SDG literacy. We don't do it very well, I think, as government. And that's where civil society is very good at breaking down the gender equality, right, into the very specific language that citizens, kind of the translation thing that we have. So the problem has always been, of course, attribution. Is how do civil society appropriate that in terms of how they attribute it, and of course, how are they financed? And that's, I think, something that, for example, we are basically cracking our heads in terms of doing an SDG alignment around legislation. So how do we facilitate? How do we ensure that there's actually a resource that trickles down to civil society in a way that, because they're actually doing something that we're supposed to do anyway. So how do we also resource them to do that? So that's something that we are actively working on in Kenya. We have a very good report in terms of our legislative alignment around that. The other bit is that at least at national level, but also at county, we are pushing together what we call an SDG. They have this very nice name. They call it reference group. So the reference group. So a reference group is, because civil society are many. So you want a reference group that actually structurally engages with government. Because private sector are very good at organizing. We have that already in terms of our private sector engages. Philanthropy already has done that. So we try to create a sort of an ecosystem where all these players structurally engage and sit at one table and measure progress over time. I tell Paul we're calling it a joint action forum. So it's not for talking. It's for action.
Hi. Well, in Mexico City, we made a council for the follow-up to the goals, and we divide them on four topics. That will be economy, that it takes decent jobs, industry, reduction of inequality, productions, and responsible consumerism. Then we take society, that will be end of poverty, no hunger, health, equality of gender, energy, cities, community, and peace. Then we put environment, that will be the clean water, weather, life in ecosystems. And finally, we make another group that is called alliances. And we happen to make alliances not only inside government, but also to civil society and NGOs. But in these councils, we place as friends, as an alliance, NGOs and civil society that are interested in these topics, because we want to hear what they want to say. We want to hear, and we want to add what they need to be done in order to accomplish these goals. So pretty much that's what we're doing in Mexico to enter civil society. Thank you.
It's part of our plan to first look at how the city is accomplishing these goals, but then to broaden out to the county and beyond, but also to include what civil society is doing. So to start with anyway, to get a baseline of who's contributing, and then that leads to natural conversations about partnerships.
Murray, the Consul General of New Zealand, Selassie, if you could give him the... Oh, Zach's stepping up. Gender equity.
Thank you. So I'm Murray, the Deputy Consul General for New Zealand. Just a quick question for any of the panel about cities and the increasingly potent role cities are playing internationally. What do you all think has caused this? Will it continue? And particularly through what mechanism, through what fora do cities deploy their increasing power, their agency internationally?
I can start, although I'm the least experienced person on this panel. But what has struck me is all these networks that exist that I didn't know about before I entered city government. But, well, C40 I probably did know about, the big climate one, which is doing clear work in fulfilling the Paris Accord. But there's resilient city networks, there's strong city network, there are many, many of them. And they're, I think, probably varying degrees of effectiveness, but that's one way. And the other is just through, these kind of bilateral and trilateral conversations with dedicated individuals. And why, I think there's more media attention to it now because there's a natural narrative of, well, the national government in the United States is stepping back, but cities are stepping forward. But I'm not sure that the activity is that much more. It's hard for me to judge, but probably someone else knows.
Let me just say one thing, because I used to do cities when I was much younger in the city of Santa Monica, and there's this long-standing, which you probably know about, Murray and others, of sister city relationships, but didn't have much substance, and often it was council members who wanted to take a nice, fun trip to New Zealand or Kenya. I think what's changed is the substance that these networks, that I think all these cities are now part of, they've got real substance. because they're issues, and that politically people realize a city is manageable. It's much harder to affect your state or your national government, but you can kind of hold the mayor or the city commissioner's feet to the fire, and then find other cities that are doing best practice and actually get something done and not have to wait for the national legislature.
I think in Africa it's a bit, I think the focus now, of course, Kenya is also the home of the headquarters of UN Habitat, right? So again, at a very disadvantage. But I think in our case, for example, Africa is increasingly decentralizing. So over the last 10 to 15 years. So the focus increasingly, as you've seen, is going more granular. Secondly, in terms of decentralization, there's also been a demand by people in terms of resources trickling down there, because that's where accountability is actually. People want to feel closer to government, and local government becomes increasingly important, right? But also, I think to the understanding that that's where service is delivered. So that there's a lot of functions around capacity at national level, there are a lot of functions around guarantees at national level, but where the nitty-gritty hits the ground, it's really serious. And I think that's the new focus. And therefore, and also in our case, you have a more educated citizenry. We have an increased space around how people can engage. There are laws that facilitate that, but also I think representation is also changing. So I feel, that's why I feel now you are hearing the buzz around cities. And I know in our case, 15 years, I see Nairobi has evolved from the older sister cities model and now to the SDGs, where Nairobi now must be a leader in terms of how it shows itself, implementing the goals, but also improving services.
Like it has already been told that there are several networks existing in which cities can collaborate with each other, and I would like, LA is also a sister city for Mumbai. However, this mechanism has not been functioning the way it should have functioned, and I hope and pray that from now onwards, at least on sustainable development goals, these cities which are here will be collaborating more frequently. And as far as civil society's participation is concerned, India is a country, like it's a very vibrant democracy, and there are very active civil society organizations, very open and free media also, which ensures that every policy that is being made at the city level has a lot of say from civil society organizations, from media, and which ensures that some kind of citizen feedback keeps coming back to us. And we have Amita here, and we were discussing about SDGs so far is not talk of the town in Mumbai. And that's what we have to, let me be very frank, I also started going through this only when this invitation came to me. So but that's what this kind of a collaboration can do. Say, I'll go back and I'll discuss with my mayor, I'll discuss with the municipal commissioner and say that, look, we need to have something like what Nairobi has already done, some SDG platform, or what Mexico is doing, or what New York has done. We need to have some kind of a platform wherein people from the civil society organizations, from media, from political leadership, and also from the cities which are sister cities with Mumbai can collaborate and make that we discuss the SDGs very frequently, and we actually start working on it. And as mayor of LA told that his dashboard is very active and it shares all the data, we in Mumbai would definitely like to work on that, and would hope that LA will be developing a dashboard for all the 169 targets and 241 indicators, which can be shared. Like he said that mayors are thieves. So we also, like Mumbai, would like to take it from LA and would like to work on it.
I was going to bring up the sister city idea, but then of course when you said it, it made me think, how come they're not brother cities? There's only sisters. We have 3 or 4 active ones, and one of the things that I think makes them work is we go to, in the case of Dublin, we go there every 2 years, and they come here in between. So we have that ongoing check and balance to see how things are going. But why local government? Because our residents elect our mayor, and regardless of who's accountable, when they don't like it, they come to City Hall and they tell us. And they say, we want better, and we want you to do it. And the other thing is, in the case of San Jose, most city workers They live in the area too, and they want it for themselves, for their families, for their neighbors. And lastly, because we have to. If nobody else is doing it, the local city has control, and we have the ability to roll up our sleeves and get it done.
I'll just echo the points that you've already made and bring it back to this question of the Sustainable Development Goals, because our office has long been mandated to exchange best practices with other cities and municipalities. But of course, every city has a different governance structure, a different language, a different way of planning and prioritizing and implementing what they think is most important for their city. And what the Sustainable Development Goals have brought for us is a common framework where we can more easily discuss and exchange best practices. And I forget who it was who highlighted this, but it's not just to say that New York City is doing a great job on all of these different topics, because we're not doing a great job on everything. It's also an opportunity to identify the gaps and learn from other cities who are taking a leadership role on other areas where we could learn.
Thank you very much. I'm curious to know how we are mapping SDGs and really being curious about where the responsibility lies for social impact within new technologies such as AI, robotics, and blockchain. And we're going to be, as part of this initiative, doing some research and convening a few people, especially in blockchain, and thinking about these are nascent industries. How do we ensure there's a strong foundation around the SDGs? So interested in your thoughts, and also if you know any of the key players that we should be speaking to, we'd love to do that.
Thank you. I think a lot of the expectations on companies come from their customers or from nonprofits pressuring them and daylighting some of the gaps and some of those inequalities. And I think it's that conversation that creates sort of the pressure to change, but also the realization on the company's part that they want to be a better company and they want to contribute to society in a positive way, not in a dilutive way. But in terms of overarching umbrella mandates, there's not any, and I think that's a great idea for us to look and say, are autonomous vehicles going to be able to pick up someone in a wheelchair? Are autonomous vehicles going to be able to pick up someone who maybe doesn't speak English in San Jose, as an example? And so we'll definitely add that in our query for our high-tech companies.
I think we're open to those ideas. The thing about Kenya is that we've sort of, I think because of the Global Partnership on Sustainable Development Data and increasingly because of the SDG Compact, I know we're actually exploring those discussions. What we've done is actually put together a lab, a data lab, a data and analytics lab in a private university that's actually, it's actually a business school. And the idea is because we are open to, first of all, experimentation, and you're not afraid to fail. But the idea is to actually be able to co-create a lot of these solutions. So the challenge is, in the case of Kenya, you have a private sector that really moves too fast beyond policy. For those who understand our M-Pesa platform, the mobile money platform, the leading mobile platform in the world, branding, in the sense that went beyond policy, and simply because private sector just ran. I think for us, then, perhaps the caveat I would say is that we are open to co-creating this and being able to, and happy to bring in players who will do this. In our case also, you need a national government, because then that gives a guarantee, and that's why I play that particular role of mediation. So I know we're exploring it in terms of policy, but I think in practice it would be really exciting, especially when we talk about blockchain and accountability and transparency, and where we need private money to start building. As I said, we don't have enough money in the public coffers, but when you want to put in private money from VCs, angel investors, then they need some sort of guarantees around privacy, and those are the solutions that we see can actually offer that.
I mean, I think what's amazing about the SDGs, and I was saying earlier, like I've really drunk the Kool-Aid on SDGs, although not, having been intimately familiar with them just over the last few months. I do think that they are a holistic look at everything that accounts for kind of human dignity and human satisfaction and human happiness at the end of the day. So the question is, I've always thought of technology as a tool, and it's a tool for what? So I don't know. I think it's a good idea to look through those lenses and through this with this framework, but I don't know that I think ultimately, at the end of the day, whatever they're used for is going to trickle down to one of these. So the example of the autonomous car and picking up wheelchair drivers, there is a whole discussion about inclusion and disabled persons in the SDGs. So that's where that there's an AI, I guess, kind of application that would drive that. So it's the question is, what is the technology being used for, or is it being used for funding? And how is it being used for funding, and is it toward the SDGs or not? So I do think that there's probably a whole bunch of different spots that you can pick up how different technologies are being used. But I think at the end of the day, it's about humans and human dignity and human happiness.
Oh, sorry, Carlos, and then we'll take a question from Peggy.
I was going to tell you about the City Lab, but actually I have a friend of mine, a colleague from Mexico City. He's actually from the lab, and I'm going to let him tell you about it. So please, Isaac, that will be better.
Hi, I'm Isaac from the City Lab, Mexico City. So we're colleagues, and the City Lab is the Urban Innovation, Creative and Experimental Department of the Government of Mexico City. And our work focuses on designing solutions for the city to address challenges and capitalizing opportunities in the city. But most of our focus is on civic engagement and how we can articulate citizens' capacities and articulating citizens and governments and different actors to collectively envision the city that we want for the future, but also collectively address the city's challenges. So we have been working from mapping the minibuses routes that we know how to get there through crowdsourcing, have 14 million trips that are taking place in the city doing that. We also, last year was very important, as Carlos was saying, was a very important year for Mexico City, since for the first time Mexico City actually stopped being the federal district. Now is the Mexico City. We gained rights. One of them was to have our own constitution. We crowdsourced the constitution, and we invited people to have, we did an exercise, for instance, called the Imagine Your City project. It was an exercise to collectively understand the city we have today and collectively envision the city we want for the future. And what you would find is that many of the concerns in citizens' minds, and also the way the city is portrayed and the way the place that the city occupies in people's minds, is often connected to many of the dimensions of the Sustainable Development Goals. So it was also an exercise that gave input for the people writing the Constitution, but many of the ideas and the way the people envision the city has to do with that. And we're also working, for instance, designing solutions for the Neighborhood Improvement Program and participatory programs to understand the processes and where the gaps are and how we can refine those processes with new tools so that we can advance the notion of mere participatory democracy towards participatory community revitalization. But we also work a lot on the narrative. For instance, many of the programs that we have that we believe we have a great potential that can contribute, they need to have a better narrative. And we have to remind that this is about people. So what we are doing is actually documenting the cases where people are actually revitalizing the communities through these programs and really going to the slums and really creating new mechanisms to inspire communities and to create mechanisms to transfer knowledge and ideas within and across neighborhoods around the city. And also articulating mechanisms so that, for instance, designers and architects can add ideas to citizens' talents, and that we can also amplify citizens' capacity so that we can collectively address many of the challenges ahead. So we're working on that, so that's part of our job and our small contribution to the city as well. So.
Let me also say your wonderful Consul General couldn't be here today, but you have one of the great Consul Generals here in LA. So. Peggy from Shanghai.
Yes, hi, my name is Peggy Liu and I live in Shanghai. And great job, Sanjeev and Derek, again. It's great to be back in Oxy. I wanted to point out possibly one intervention that sometimes is overlooked, but really cuts across all of the SDGs. My background is that for the last decade I've run an organization called Joint U.S.-China Collaboration on Clean Energy. And as part of that, we've taught about 1,000 mayors and central government bureau heads in China how to build sustainable cities. We work on electrical grid, turning it into smart grid, smart cities, and things like that. We've worked with Rit Agrawala and Amanda Burden and Bloomberg. Plan NYC for Chinese language. So for the last decade, I've spent a lot of my life looking at infrastructure in cities. And what I've only realized in 2013, working on something called the China Dream, which is the sort of the new national identity for China, is that food education for young children, changing the way that we eat so that it's good for you and good for the planet, is actually the single intervention that cuts across cost-effectively all SDGs. So David Nabarro, the special advisor to the UN SDGs, in 2016 even, at the UN UNGA, he talked about this, basically focusing on food education for young children. And so we have been focused since 2013, previously focused on everything on infrastructure, now focused on demand side, and focusing on 4 to 9 year old kids because that's the acupressure point for change. I also wanted to point out Drawdown, which is the first comprehensive plan to reverse global warming. The book came out April 7th. I'm on the board, but it's an list of 80 solutions to reverse global warming. And the top 20 solutions, 8 of them are food related. So 30% of greenhouse gas emissions come from food. So I just wanted to point out sometimes people overlook some of these obvious Trojan horses or cost-effective interventions, but this is something that is easy to do. Things like sugary drink taxes, ultra-processed food taxes can raise revenue to do, like in Mexico, for example, can raise revenue for this easy intervention. So I would love to explore that with any of you.
Thanks, Peggy. I mean, that's a great point, is what role do not just students, but children have to play in these, because it's about changing values. Would anyone want to comment finally?
It's a good idea, and food, say in India, majority of the population, for that matter, the habits as such traditionally have been more climate resilient rather. Still, agriculture is one area in which a lot needs to be done to make it more, which doesn't affect climate badly. Especially the chemical fertilizers that have been used during the Green Revolution in the 60s and 70s, and even during the second Green Revolution that we have been expecting after 2010. This use of nitrogenous fertilizers, which ultimately affects the climate, this needs to be curtailed in agriculture. However, like we are in city and Mumbai is left with no agricultural land. But food pattern, yes, from schooling, especially India in all its public schools has got a midday meal program in which meals are provided during the lunchtime to all the school children across the government schools, public schools. And that meal itself is like very healthy meal that is provided. And again, that aspect of it should not be having larger carbon footprints is there because it's a traditional food that is being provided, local food that is being provided. However, we would definitely like to learn from what is being done by China on these points because China and India can be compared on several points and we can learn from each other. Thank you.
Yeah, the boss here, we're going to have to stop, but I'm sure the panelists are going to, most of them will be around if you want to come up and at least trade cards. And I want to thank Sanjeev for putting together this powerful program. And let me just add my perspective as an old politician. To me, the real power of this movement, this urban-based adoption of these goals, is that it's a way to take this phrase that everybody uses, GDP and growth, and get inside it and say, what is the content, who benefits, the impact in the environment, and the equity consequences. So we're never really going to get governments to get out of the GDP business, but this creates a whole new opportunity at the urban level to change the definition of economic growth. So congratulations to everybody. So far, so good. And thank you all for coming to Occidental.